Welcome to everyone for joining us for this session on It's More Than Academics, Blending Learning Across Campus. My name is Siobhan Bowen, and I am a director with the Wisconsin Technical College System Office. And we are very excited to be hosting this session as a part of our third WTCS Faculty Summit. As we get started, I just want to start by covering a few session expectations that we have for everyone today. In terms of engagement, we just ask that you take this time while you've joined us to listen actively and be present and be a part of our room as much as possible. There's a lot of great stuff coming your way, so we don't want you to miss anything. Feel free to be curious to ask those questions that you have. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and so I know I'm one who, if I don't ask something right away, sometimes I forget. Feel free to put your questions as you think of them in the chat if you'd like, and we'll make sure that we get to all of those questions and also open the room for anyone who has questions they just thought of at the end when we get to the end of the session. And then also just make sure there's some good balance as there's dialogue or as we're doing the question and answer session, just making sure that if we're someone who maybe, tends to be a little more reserved, that we try and step out of that if we can, or especially if we're curious and take some of that space. And if we're someone who really loves to engage and share a lot of things on a regular basis, then just making sure that we're making some space for others in the room as well. Some other things that I would just share with you. We recognize that many of you are taking a lot of time out of your busy schedules, out of spending time with family. So we do plan to make the most of your time this evening throughout this session. We have some friends who are looking forward to viewing this at a later time. They weren't able to make it with us at this time. And so this is just a gentle reminder, and you probably saw it when you first popped in, that the session is being recorded. So just to remind you of that. If you need to turn on captions or have an interest in turning on captions during the session, you'll click on those three dots at the top of the meeting, probably says more underneath it. And then you'll click on language and speech. And then from there, you can click on turn on live captions. And if you'd like some more information on that, I did place the Microsoft support link in the chat for you all to access. At the end of this session, I will be putting a link to what we call an exit ticket. I'll put that in the chat, and just asking for brief feedback on the session, and also encouraging you to share an action step that you want to take based on what you learned today. So we're looking forward to gathering your thoughts and reflections on the session through that exit ticket. I just realized another link that I could share with you all, and that's to our WTCS Faculty Summit site. All resources and recordings from all of the sessions throughout the Faculty Summit will be available on this site, and our goal is to have those uploaded within the next week. You will all receive an email from us once those resources and recordings are available. I think that's all that I need to say. So I'd love to turn it over at this time to our presenters. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So welcome. It's exciting to see so many people joining us. And I know a number of people obviously will be watching this a little later. So my name is Diana, and I am going to kind of just get us started off and talking, and we'll introduce ourselves in just a moment. But our topic today is specifically about how we can blend learning across campus. So myself and Allie, the presenters for this particular presentation, have developed this presentation as a way to kind of just raise awareness of what is the difference between curricular learning and co-curricular learning here at Nicolet College. And also then to think about how can we really get intentional about how we assess that type of learning, and also how can we get intentional about how we provide rich learning experiences both within and outside of the classroom on campus. And so what we will be doing today is kind of just an interactive presentation where we'll be walking you through a very familiar metaphor of putting together a s'more. And that will be kind of the basis for what we talk about and how we kind of build this shared understanding of curricular, co-curricular, and then how we can kind of put them together in a very kind of dynamic process. Yeah, so do you want to add anything, Abby?
Hi, everyone. Nope, just really happy to be here with you all. We'll do some further introductions here next. If I can go to the next screen, there we go. Diana, you can go first.
Okay, so again, my name is Diana Rickert. I am part of the early childhood education team, which is actually of two people here on campus at Nicolet. I am the program director and one of the instructors. I also serve on a number of committees and teams elsewhere on campus, and one of my passions is about assessment. I've been part of the Assessment Academy team, which was formed in 2022. And what we are really focused on is quality improvement on campus, specifically around accountability related to assessment. And so one of the things that we've done as a group, an assessment group, is to really pull in try to work on a project to improve assessment on campus. And we have been working on a project that has kind of directly led to this particular presentation in some ways. So part of that team recognized the importance of thinking about co-curricular in addition to curricular assessment. And that is kind of how I'll tie Allie into the piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Allie Pichowski. I am the manager of instructional resources here at Nicolet College. Before this role, I was an academic advisor, and before that, I was an elementary educator for 10 years and a library media specialist in the school, the Three Lakes School District up north. So part of my role is managing the library. I also manage our campus bookstore and work with our OER coordinator to facilitate instructional resources for faculty and students. And I was asked to be part of the co-curricular assessment team last year as part of my role. And I like to joke that I really had no idea how to be excited about assessment until I got into this work. I mean, even when I was an educator, it kind of stressed me out, and it was one of the harder parts of my job. But Diana and I have been working closely to bridge this curricular and co-curricular assessment to work more together to achieve some assessment goals across campus. And I, with the co-curricular assessment team, and we are constantly working on ways to provide assessments in our work, what that looks like. And for us, a really seamless way that this kind of came together is working more closely with faculty. So my role is still within that team, and it's kind of evolved to working a little bit more with faculty on their assessment goals as well. So we're really happy to have you all here. So being a former educator and Diana being in the elementary early childhood role, we want to activate your prior knowledge and kind of get you connected with the topic. Like I said, when I was asked to be on this co-curricular assessment team, I was like, sure, what does this mean? So it was definitely working a different side of my brain. So just, we want you to think before we kind of get into things, how you can connect with this topic by answering the question, thinking and considering your students' overall learning experience across campus. What key outcomes do you want your students to achieve by the time they leave your classroom or program? So Diana and I were talking about this. She's got a pretty specific set of goals that she wants her students to achieve by the time they finish their time with her. And I've got a completely different set of goals that I'm looking for with my students that come to the library, with faculty, and then also we're open to the community. So I have kind of different experiences I'm looking for people to achieve. So if you want to either just go ahead and call out what are some outcomes you want them to achieve by the time they leave their time with you, or write that in the chat. Go ahead and take a minute to connect with this concept. I'm going to pull this over so I can also see the chat. Okay, so we see, I want them to master all of the competencies for the class. Yep, we are going to talk about that in a little bit. The competencies that Diana's looking specifically to teach to her students. Diana, do you have one off the top of your head?
So a specific competency that we're going to talk a little bit more about is one of the skills that students have to walk away, or hopefully walk away from one of the classes with, would be to demonstrate effective reading strategies, interactive reading strategies with children and families. And so that is something that, you know, kind of getting more specific, you know, it's one of the many competencies that are in my class. So if you want to even take a second to think more specifically about, like, you know, obviously we want them to master all the competencies. How about even like on a bigger scale, what are some, you know, bigger takeaways that you hope students take away from a college experience, or even, you know, maybe some abilities?
So Becky wrote, my hope is that they apply the concepts in class into the real world, specifically to be better communicators. I teach oral and interpersonal communication and speech classes. Absolutely. That is one that we'll talk about in a bit. A priority in our college is communication, and I work with a lot of student workers, so that's a big goal for me, is for them to be able to communicate effectively. Good.
Great point. And that's one of those ones that kind of transcends and weaves throughout all the curriculum on campus and all of the experiences on campus. And so that will tie really well with something that we're going to talk about when it comes to kind of our institutional goals.
Yeah. And then successfully complete the performance assessment tasks and carry into the real world. Yep. Excellent. I like this connection with real world, which is something we're going to talk about. We're all on the same page. Look at that. All right. Thank you for that. I want them to be able to find answers to their questions without me. Yep. I feel that in the library. All right. So we are going to get going with our s'mores framework now.
And you'll have more of an opportunity to kind of share ideas. So keep thinking about this stuff, because we're going to do something in just a second where you can even build on what you just were maybe thinking of. Okay, so curricular learning is the first part of our s'more. It's really the structure of our s'more. So if you think about the Graham is going to provide the structure for the kind of the foundation of what we're going to be building on. That is the foundation of student learning that often happens within the context of a classroom. And so frequently we are thinking in terms of what standards, what competencies, as was mentioned in the chat, what is the planned classroom instruction? And when I say classroom, obviously that is also inclusive of our online classrooms and even field experience type classrooms, which we have in my program. So when I think about curricular learning, I think specifically about my program outcomes, because I teach in an occupational program. And so I know there are 6 program outcomes in my program. And those program outcomes are kind of the umbrella under which all of those course competencies fall, and all those classes are kind of housed underneath those program outcomes. And so an example of curricular learning in my program would be, if I think kind of on a bigger scale, you know, one of the program outcomes would be to for students to use best practices in teaching and learning, which relates to a lot of what we have to do as obviously instructors as well. But my students as educators do that too. But then breaking it down a little and thinking of how that might look in a class. One example that I mentioned earlier was students will demonstrate how to do interactive reading, for example, with children and families in a specific class, which is early language and literacy. So my when I think about the gram for my students, you know, that would be what I'd be thinking of, specifically the classroom experience, the classroom expectations of what they're going to kind of take away. So
Diana and I have presented this several times in person. Once to faculty on a faculty development day, once to our leadership team, and then now we are presenting it also in person for the Board of Trustees here at the college. And when we present this, at this point, we would give you a graham cracker. So consider this your virtual graham cracker that you will be building your learning upon today. Also, if you're paying attention, we have a kitschy little metaphor that we will wrap up at the end, and maybe you can figure out where it comes from. So first you take the gram. We want you to think about what is your foundation for your work that you're going to be doing. What is one example of curricular learning in your program, or a specific activity that you can think about doing with your students? So we're going to ask that you take a second to consider this example. Think about your program outcomes and specific course competencies. What's one activity or example of learning in your program? And we're going to have you scan the QR code here, and it will bring you to a Padlet. So I am going to try my best to get there seamlessly, and I did it. Okay, great. So here's the Padlet we want you to build off of. We're looking at this first column here, so we will come back to these as well. But right now we're talking about this foundation of the assessment piece. So we want you to think of an example, a specific example. So Diana, do you want to share your specific example?
yes. So I also want to say, when you're thinking about your example here, you might want to think of something that's kind of applied, something that you, or something that you want to get a little innovative with, in terms of maybe you've been struggling to assess a certain outcome in your program, or you feel like something might be missing. So when I thought of my specific example, that was kind of the framework from which I was coming. So again, my program outcome that I was thinking of, if you wanted to kind of go that route, kind of go bigger picture, I was thinking about students demonstrating best practices in teaching and learning. And then I thought about a specific competency. At this point, we don't expect you to do that level of thinking, but my competency that I feel like students maybe don't get quite the experience in the program, you know, I feel like they needed a little more, was demonstrating interactive reading strategies with children. So I started thinking, this is a particular competency or a particular type of curricular learning that I'm interested in thinking more about and maybe developing a bit more. So kind of as you're making your selection of what you're going to add, you might want to specifically, you know, just think about that. Like, what would you want to kind of work on? Or what do you feel like would be a skill that students could get a richer experience in? So what we're asking you to do then is just click on that little chat. Whoops.
Well, they're going to have to scan the QR.
Yes. Okay. So, yep. So click on that little QR code, and then you'll click on that little chat bubble to be able to add to the Padlet. And
we'll give you about 5 minutes to think of that specific activity. So go ahead and scan the QR, go to that Padlet, and add into that first column. I realize now 5 minutes might be a little extreme, but we'll give you another minute or two. All right, it looks like we have a couple answers coming in. That's great. I love the nicknames that these platforms give people. Supportive Elephant is a good one. When I presented something similar to our faculty development day, I presented this kind of beginning stage concept, and faculty came up with some really great learning activities based on their programs. So this is a great example already. So for a radiography program, students will learn to evaluate images for diagnostic value. It's great. Core abilities. So you probably have some specific ideas in mind of what those would be, which we will actually discuss here in a little bit. OICOM, analyze how culture impacts communication styles. Great. And then activity specifically with it. Students interview someone from another co-culture to discover the goal of their communication in that co-culture. How is it different than the student's norm? Really great. Those are really great examples. So yeah, the first step in this kind of framework that we've come up with is really coming up with one idea, one activity. And it might not be the activity you move forward with, but it's just getting your head wrapped around what is something I could do to start this co-curricular collaboration. Thank you for doing that. All right, Diana, do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I think you kind of captured it well. I mean, like you said, this is just to get the thought process going. We don't expect you to perfect an idea at this point, but it's just to kind of start to have something to build upon, that foundation, that structure, like the metaphor of the s'more graham cracker.
So after we have our graham cracker, what comes next is the chocolate. You stick the chocolate on the graham, okay? What we kind of thought of is we have a base of a curricular activity. Now we can consider what is a co-curricular activity that could align with that activity. So co-curriculars are experiences that align with student outcomes connected to their curricular and career goals. So all of the WTCS schools have co-curriculars. We are not an extremely large institution, so we might not have as many as some of you might. But some of the examples of co-curriculars we have that's part of like the co-curricular assessment team that I'm on are the Career Center, Work Study, Student Clubs is a really huge active one, Study Abroad, Student Government, etc. So we all meet together as a team and talk about our own assessments that are going on. When I was asked to present this to faculty this summer, we came up with some brainstorming on how our co-curricular assessments could piggyback off of curricular learning as well. We are also coming up with our own co-curricular assessments all the time. So some examples of that, we base these off the core abilities. One is a work study assessment that's being used. So at the beginning of an individual's work study time, they are filling out a survey based on, their current level of knowledge, their current communication skills, things like that. After their time is done, then their supervisor is also filling out a survey to see how that has improved, especially the communicate effectively one, which someone mentioned earlier. We're looking to see, has this person improved on their daily communication? How are they answering the phone in the library? How is their email communication? Is it professional? Things like that. Our disability support services staff member 2 is also doing a survey where she's asking people, did you use the accommodations you had available to you? Was the communication coming to you appropriate? So it's kind of tapping into a different side of your brain to consider what a co-curricular assessment could be. Hence the reason it has really worked well with me to consider how to work with faculty on those assessments. One that I did last term was with our English composition teacher, she had a poetry unit and wanted students to come get books out of the library. Well, we don't have a massive physical library. So students requested books through interlibrary loan, and they did their project based on the library book that they got. But to wrap up their learning, not only did they do their curricular assessment, but they did a co-curricular assessment for me in which they decided whether or not they would recommend adding the book to our collection. So they had to write a little book review and present it to me on whether or not they would recommend me purchasing the book, which was really fun. And they loved it. They thought it was, they took a lot of ownership in it. So that might have been something that was difficult for me to come up with my head alone, but working with a faculty member, we both got to experience student learning and student growth. So yeah, we would like you to consider this too.
And I just want to say too, in terms of the assessment team on campus, we really started talking about co-curricular learning as being something we needed to think about, because it is something that HLC does look for being assessed. You know, there are assessments. And so at first, we had gone to a couple trainings with other folks working on some assessment work across the country. And we did hear a lot of people say they were confused about how would you do co-curricular assessment. And so that kind of led to our discussion about innovative ways to think about assessing co-curricular, but then also pairing it with faculty assessments, which is kind of the basis of this project. And I just wanted to highlight that, that's a little bit of where that train of thought came from.
So yeah, if you could now take a second to go back to that Padlet, you can also put it in the chat too if you'd like to do that. But consider what is a way that a co-curricular could possibly help emphasize the activity that you're thinking for your what you thought of with it earlier in the Padlet. Now, it could be maybe that the activity you're thinking doesn't really coordinate with a co-curricular, which is more than possible. But maybe think about something that could possibly relate to one of the co-curriculars we have here, or maybe something you have in mind there. A little bit later, we're going to show you what that looked like for our faculty. But if you could take 2 minutes to think about that, that would be great.
And I'll just share
the second column.
Yeah, the example from Nicolet, which is on the screen, just because it might be a little confusing to read. So the Nicolet College Library had been thinking about just, ways to engage the community. And so that was something that Allie was already, thinking about, and had some specific learning outcomes that she had wanted to assess related to that. And then my students needed authentic experiences in interacting and reading with children. And so we came up with a collaborative idea based upon the fact that we had kind of these two different ideas. We kind of merged together and came up with a collaborative idea to plan and facilitate a community story time that would be ongoing at the library as part of a spring semester class that I had previously kind of alluded to.
So there's our example. So if you could think of an example, that would be great. It might be a little bit much to do it spur of the moment. It does take a little bit of different side of your brain, but give you a minute to look at that. Okay, so for the sake of time, we will kind of move to the next bit. We hope you all got a little bit of time to consider what this could look like, what activity, a co-curricular activity could support your activity that you are considering an assessment for. So very good answers here already. Continue kind of thinking about that, the graham cracker, the curricular, the chocolate, the co-curricular, and how they can kind of get put together, how the co-curricular can support the other.
And the way I like to think of it, just to throw it out there, is the chocolate is the richness that is provided to kind of enhance that curricular experience. So it's the enrichment piece. Without the chocolate, it would be really dry, so we have these rich experiences that's going to really help.
That's right. I'm not going to go into this slide too much, but these are some of the benefits of co-curriculars if you want to come back and watch the recording, most of which I'm sure that you have considered, but just a little plug for co-curricular involvement. In our institution, there are some, folks that we're really thrilled to just get a reminder of what the co-curriculars were, and who are these groups and who's kind of the person I go to for that co-curricular. So it's been a really nice connection between curricular and co-curriculars. All right, so Diana's going to talk about institutional outcomes.
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the focuses of that assessment team that formed in 2022 at Nicolet was to work on a project for quality improvement purposes. So we knew we had this HLC visit coming up in 2025, which we just actually successfully got through, which is wonderful. But one of the things that we were wanting to work on prior to the visit, but just kind of as an ongoing effort, was to improve our assessment practices, specifically around our institutional outcomes. So institutional student learning outcomes are the outcomes that are the overarching outcomes that all colleges have, specifically WTCS colleges have, related to all students. So it's not just, I want my students to learn these things in the early childhood program. My students are going to learn the same outcomes in terms of the core abilities, which is what we call them, as students in the, for example, the welding program or the nursing program. They all are going to be focused on the same institutional outcomes. So if our umbrella over our competencies is our program outcomes, this would be, a bigger umbrella, or the sky, or something like that, something that's just a bigger, kind of an overarching, framework. So what we always had these embedded in our courses, but we felt like we weren't doing a really good job of actually assessing them. That was something that we know we needed to shore up. So we have since developed rubrics, and we are in the process of actually determining whether these are still good core abilities to be using at the college, or if we maybe want to tweak them. But it's a multi-year pilot project that we're doing. So part of this whole process was mapping these core abilities to courses, which I'm sure many of you have done that with your institutional outcomes, is think of how they fit into your program or your courses. But then also mapping them to the co-curriculars was kind of an innovative idea that we also came up with. And it was a way to do that assessment that the HLC was requiring of student learning outcomes with co-curriculars. So it's just a way of kind of bringing it together into one package. So I'll let Allie talk a little bit about the visual and kind of what her experiences are related to that.
Yeah, so at the curriculum mapping day, I was invited to that to kind of talk about co-curricular assessments. And I made it really fun. I brought colorful stickers, I brought puffy stickers, and there was posters up across the room with different core abilities. So just like you did, I had faculty members think of one activity that they want to focus an assessment on. And then I had them think of a co-curricular area that could support the learning for their students in that activity, and what core ability that would match. So faculty members went over to the posters, the core ability posters, and they brought up an activity and then the co-curricular that could support that. So a couple of them you'll see here is like the catering foundation event is a huge event we have here on campus. And to support the core ability of building community, our culinary instructor thought that they could maybe pull in student clubs to help with that, to connect with foundation donors, things like that. Here we have disability support services working with an instructor to transcribe a voice recording to work on that core ability of communicating effectively. We had about 3 pages of different ideas of things. Now, that's not to say all of these will work in the end, but it was just a way for us to start brainstorming these connections. So just thinking about like here, an accounting program page, posting articles for students that they read and reply to, being offered through the library website, that they all have a centralized location to go to after their course, have all of these articles and resources available to them, working on that core ability of building community. So we're taking the co-curricular, the graham cracker, we're taking the co-curricular, the chocolate, we're taking a core ability, the marshmallow, and we're putting them together. And now if you were our leadership team, you would say, well, where's the fire? And we would say, we brought it. And can we light it? And they let us. So that was really fun. So we're going to talk next about what that means, adding the heat.
Great. So basically, we were then thinking, we've thought about these connections between the various different types of learning that are happening on campus. And we also, as I mentioned, in that assessment team, that assessment academy group that I was part of, we were working on developing rubrics for our core abilities, and then linking those rubrics to the courses. So we also were thinking, how can we then, have the co-curriculars be using those same rubrics to do some of their assessments, and what would they be looking for? And so really, we were really focused on this basically the teaching cycle, the idea that we, in order to be able to continuously improve, we want to think about what are we going to observe in our students, what can we document in our students to actually be able to know whether or not they're learning what we hope they are learning. And really that fire that is happening as we are doing that process is really what melts the layers of that s'more together and holds everything together, because it shows what students learn and what they need to know next. And so by doing assessment, we're able to learn a little bit about what they've done, but we're able to implement some actual experiences through this collaborative process, and then assess for both parties, the co-curricular and the curricular. And then, that's a really synergistic process. And then we are kind of using that flame to, and really reflecting on what our s'more looks like, based upon how that marshmallow melted and everything kind of came together. Because really, assessment is kind of that temperature check. Was our fire hot enough? Did we really nail and get what we wanted to get through this experience? If it wasn't, then nothing's going to stick together. And so we can really assess and think about learning experiences through the process of this building of our s'more. So so basically the teaching cycle is really kind of a metaphor here to just think about, obviously thinking about the how we implement, how we kind of plan, putting things into practice and assessing, and then continuing to constantly improve.
So we want you to think about what will you be observing or documenting to bring everything together with everything we've talked about so far to make it a more cohesive and meaningful learning experience. I'm going to pop over to the Padlet here. So Diana she would probably be looking for an assessment of open-ended questions, doing a cover walk. She's looking at specific storytelling, read aloud elements, and she would be observing those things to assess. Right, Diana, is that accurate?
Yeah, and then because we did the mapping of the core abilities, not only is that going to be assessing my course competencies, but it also is aligning with a core ability, which is that institutional outcome of communicate effectively. And I just want to mention one thing because we didn't pull up that document, but every college has core abilities, but you might call them something different. Some people call them employability skills. Some people call them institutional learning outcomes. And what I did do was go to each website and just try to identify what you call them at your various colleges: critical life skills, success abilities. I think that's such a creative way
that's
to.
fun.
Yeah, that is. But some of them are harder to find, and some of them are right out in the open and easy to find. So the links I had are kind of optional. But if you are kind of wondering what should I be looking for to make those connections, I just wanted to mention that because I know we had too many to pull up. So, but going back to my example, or the example, so I was focusing on one specific course, my specific learning outcome, and then, but that's aligned already with a core ability. And then Allie, I'll let you kind of talk about what you are looking at and what core you align with.
Yeah, so I'm looking for community participation, engagement of the community in all stages of life. So really working on that building community and embracing lifelong learning. Libraries are lifelong learning. So yeah, I'm looking for some core abilities that are different than Diana's. Some of them might overlap, but in that same story time, I'm looking for other assessments to see how that went and if that's something that the library can sustain doing. So just we're a couple minutes out from the ending. So just take maybe a minute to consider what would you be looking from your activity? What are you looking to assess? What is the kind of the heat behind the activity? You're all going to have different things. We'll probably just leave it at you kind of considering this instead of going through and sharing. But yeah, this is really just considering what is the outcome, what is the competency that you are wanting your student or the activity to bring about. Like in my co-curriculars, I'm looking at these activities as whether or not they will continue going on. So yeah, just think about that. I'm sure tonight we'll all be tired when we are done here, but when you go on from here. Diana, I am going to quickly stop sharing and reshare because I need to enable my sound.
Sure. I was just going to mention too, just going back to something mentioned in the past column, there was mention about working with the community as well. So a really good way to build on this concept is it kind of relates to service learning as well. And, if we really think about how can we kind of extend this into the community, obviously, community members aren't going to be thinking always in terms of our, institutional learning outcomes, but we're just trying to think of specifically how we can kind of kill multiple birds with one stone, if you will. I kind of don't like that analogy, but I'm just going to use it here. By doing one is like, we're all kind of engaging in the same experience to assess things. But I love the idea that we could actually take this idea and extend it out into the community, because that is a big effort and a big focus. I know at our school where we're talking about what kind of service learning experiences, like is mentioned by Wildfather on the middle column, can we actually do that as well? So this again can be really extended beyond the college campus.
So yeah, I feel like we had a lot to throw at you in 50 minutes. This is still an evolving project that we're working on. We are getting our story time front loading done now, getting it planned, and then we'll have everything implemented, and then the assessment will come the end of the spring term. The formal assessment and kind of pulling this whole framework together. So, in conclusion, we just want you to remember that just like a s'more, all of the individual components are important, but when you put them together, it really makes the experience more enjoyable, not only to eat a s'more, but also for a student's learning experience. I'm so excited to do this story time up here. It's going to just be so many multi-layered elements. I joked with our leadership team that I've never been so excited about assessment. we're just having so much fun talking about it and planning it. And then the assessment is going to come really seamlessly from all of this fun collaboration we've been doing. So any last thoughts, Diana?
No, do we want to have them guess what the analogy was from, or your little?
Yep. Did anyone up on the top, we had kind of some clues going across. If you want to throw into the chat before I go to the last slide of what that was in reference to, you'll win a virtual high five.
We'll give you a hint. It's from a movie.
A movie that I bought on VHS at Kmart.
Sandlot, good guess. Time frame is kind of on track, right? Or is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kmart, yeah. Thank you, Brenda. We had a lot of fun with it, and it's been fun to share it with other people. They like the snack, and we like to bring in our elementary educatorness into things and make seemingly complicated or not exciting topics fun. Okay, Edward, you get the virtual high five. Great job. It is from The Sandlot, one of my personal favorites. So we just want to leave you with the fun scene from that because this is a fun concept. Never thought that we would have so much fun with this, but we are having fun sharing things with faculty. We're having fun working together. We're trying to bring a little joy into our work and some fun references and always snacks too. So if you have any questions, we'll leave you with the clip. Feel free to email either of us. I know we had like a ton of information we threw at you really quickly, but feel free to contact either of us. And if you can, like Siobhan just shared, the exit ticket, that would be great. And we will leave you with the best clip ever cinematically. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.